Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It is I, Zar Antonov, head of the International Society of Dracology, and I have with me today.
Hi, this is Clostridium of the Republic of California, formerly of the People's Republic of Berkeley. Uh, yeah, I'm here, I guess, to talk about dragons.
Yes, you sure are. This is episode where we at now 3 of Dragon Talks. Now the year of the dragon is almost over, and in fact, when you watch this video, it might already be over. But we are still continuing this series until I have all the regions covered for which I have people. And Clostridium here is a dragon expert, I'd say. And so he's going to talk, since he's from North America, obviously, he's going to talk about some dragons from that area of the world. So I'm gonna hand over to you now, and you go ahead and enlighten us.
Sure. Sure. So, dragons of the United States and Canada. So, first of all, I think it'd be good to kind of define what is a dragon because it's a very amorphous term that seems to have different associations even over the years, even over recent years. Um, so this is my personal interpretation of what a dragon is, and some people may disagree with me. That's absolutely fine with that. If you look at that image I put as a joke on the right, you can kind of see that there's a clear spectrum of how and what you can define as a dragon, depending on how traditionalist and strict or liberal and open you want. So, under my definition, a dragon is a great chaotic chimeric serpent who rules over a natural element. Now, there almost always is distinguishing between great serpents, giant ones, and lesser serpents like snakes and lizards, almost across all cultures. Um, and yeah, um, dragons specifically are almost always associated with some natural element. In the United States and Canada, this is frequently water and lightning. They're associated with rains. And actually, if you go through the world, most definitions of dragons, including the lungs of Asia, seem to follow this motif. Is the European dragon with its motif of fire that seems to be more the exception than the norm. Um, They generally seem to have arrived independently in multiple different cultures at different times. And most modern interpretations of dragons seem to have them associated with, again, snakes and lizards, serpents, and also fossil histories, people coming across giant bones and then linking it to dragons, and usually with some chimeric fusion of multiple different characteristics. Like, for example, in Asia, fusing the antler horns of the lion's mane to a serpent, whereas in Europe, linking bat wings and the seven sins of Catholicism to dragons. Now, a lot of these characteristics of dragons are a bit biased for European dragons, and thus some of these characteristics have are in fact actually optional, seen across different cultures, and that includes stuff like being quadruped, having scales and wings, or flight. Um, they may cover some dragons may have all of them, some dragons may have none of them, some may have combinations of these. And then there's also closely related mythological creatures with some distinct non-serpent like characteristics that would separate them, that otherwise they would fall under the dragon category. And if you're in a very loose definition of what a dragon is, these would actually be counted as dragons. But I think for the sake of my argument, I'm just going to separate them right now as bird-like, like griffins and thunderbirds, fish-like, sea monsters, and equine-like, like geelings and mashus. So, having gone through that, a quick loose categorization of dragons of the United States and Canada could be done chronologically, i.e., we can start with the initial native or First Nation dragons, and then go through the successive waves of immigration to the North American continent and how that changed the perception of dragons and arose new dragon concepts. And then that has kind of persisted to the modern day. And there's a somewhat arbitrary cutoff that I made of about 1900 of modern cryptid, cryptid dragons that have been fused into urban legend and local culture. And there's significant overlap of these. Some of these modern cryptids, like say the Jersey Devil or some of the great lake monsters, have hypothetically at least been traced back to some First Nation sightings, and then usually reinterpreted through immigrant settlers visiting, learning about those legends, and then applying, modifying, and adding to their own experiences to it. So, first of all, native dragons. So most of these dragons appear to be offshoots of what is known as the Great Serpent tradition. This actually seems relatively cohesive, and there seems to be a fair amount of overlap with Mesoamerica, especially for some of the more southern cultures and American Southwest, like Oasis America. And for example, you can see on the right there an image of what's known as the alligator mound, but most modern interpretations would call it as probably an underwater panther. The image below that is of a winged serpent of, I believe, Missouri or Alabama from a pottery artifact. And you can see how closely it kind of overlaps with some of the motifs that have been seen in, for example, Aztec or other Mesoamerican art forms. Now, I think for simplicity's sake, this is just a quick overview. Some native dragons include horned serpents, underwater panthers, and what's known as the Gesindiefa, or I can't even pronounce that, meteor dragon. So by far the most common is the horned serpent, or great serpent. And it's, as they say, a giant serpent, sometimes with horns, sometimes with feathers, that is associated with water, rain, lightning, and rebirth. And this seems to be traced back at least to the Hopewell culture of Ohio, who are known for kind of their giant effigies in the dirt. You can see one of the most famous ones, the Serpent Mound, on the upper right, which seems to depict the snake eating an egg or possibly a celestial object. Besides horns, sometimes it's associated with feathers, and that and water and rebirth again seems linked to some Mesoamerican dragons, such as the Quetzalcoatl of Mexico. As far as uh, the expansion is concerned, that seems related to what's known as the Southeastern Ceremonial Complex, which is an aspect of what was known as the Mississippian culture. And through that, it appears to have spread throughout most of the east coast of the US and even a bit into the western deserts. And then when the Mississippian culture kind of fell apart, these legends and stuff got somewhat isolated and kind of achieved their own regional characteristics. And for example, the Tiwa of New Mexico, they saw the horned serpent as benevolent, guardian of water, harbinger of storms, and protector of, in fact, the Puebloan people. The Iroquois also generally see it as benevolent, but apparently there are legends of them trying to seduce young women. and some of the Muskogee, the Creeks, and Cherokee seem to see them more as traditional serpents with some magical healing or wisdom properties to them. And meanwhile, the Lakota have what's known as the Ifkefi, which is very malevolent and seems to have sown destruction until it was defeated and killed by its great rival, the Thunderbird, and its bones scattered across the landscape. And most people seem to associate that with kind of the dinosaur bones that have been recovered in the Badlands of the Dakotas. So, kind of as a subcategory of horned serpents, is the underwater panther, which is also known as the great lynx in the Machu Picchu by the Ojibwa tribe of the Great Lakes region. And the underwater panther seems mostly associated with the Great Lakes region and also the American Southeast. And here, the dragon seems to have been more of a cat, with the head and paws of a cat, but with scales or even feathers. But again, like its predecessor, the horned serpent, it seems to be greatly associated with water. And for the underwater panther, is claimed by the Ojibwa to rule the underworld and control serpents, and is mostly malevolent. And uniquely, it seems to jealously guard copper gold deposits of the Great Lakes. The Great Lakes having, interestingly, some of the purest deposits of natural copper in the world, almost pure on the ground. And for a while, there were native civilizations that seemed to use these coppers as tools and weapons and so on. But then that at some point dropped away somewhat abruptly. And by the time European settlers came, most of these were seen as taboo. And somehow that seems associated with the underwater panther. And there are some of the early explorers say that there are stories of natives getting trying to collect copper and then getting chased by the underwater panther, who claim that they're stealing from her children. And so, yeah, if you go to the next slide, you can kind of see that underwater panthers are kind of a subset of horned serpents, and there's a lot of overlap. Now, my interpretation of that is that after the collapse of kind of the southeastern culture complex, and everyone kind of acquired their own flavor, and then as things went on, they kind of went back and like changed concepts of horned serpents, clashed with older changed concepts of horned serpents, and it kind of creates this giant spectrum that I don't think anyone can easily distinguish through them. Now, that photo on the right was from a trip I went to the Mojave, which is very, very far. It's in California. And no one quite knows what that figure, which is giant stick figures carved into the dirt and only visible from the sky, depicts. But one interpretation of it seems to be similar to some of the local Mojave legends, is that it depicts a mountain lion fighting a giant serpent. Now, there's other interpretations of what it is, but that seems to be one of the big ones currently. Now, another subset of the underwater panther is the Gosiphian bifa, also known as the meteor dragon or the fire lion. And as I said, to be Seneca and inhabit Lake Ontario on the New York Canadian border. And this one is interesting mainly because it's an underwater panther, but also there's fire. The meteor dragon can spew fire and it flies on a trail of fire. And the interpretation of it is that the Seneca linked the underwater panther legend to meteors streaking across the sky. So the next big category is what I call immigrant transfer dragons. When European immigrants came to us, now the United States and Canada, they brought their own traditions along, and sometimes it mixed with some of the native um, traditions and assimilated with them. And that kind of gave a certain flavor of westernizing, um, or kind of what we see as European dragons, bringing that tradition into the United States. And actually, this is another half joke, but the cartoon series American Dragon has Jake Long being an Asian dragon, but now with bat wings, which is definitely a Western motif. And so you kind of see that similar change for a lot of legends here. Um, So American dragons I call include the Piasa, the Cumberland dragon, the Snallygasher, and even the famous Jersey Devil. So first of all is the Piasa, or according to John Russell in 1836, the bird that devours men. The legend basically says that the Piasa bird got attracted to human flesh after coming across fighting between the natives and ended up basically going around eating people until this chief Otaga of the Ilini came, baited himself, and finally slew it in combat over the limestone caves overlooking the Mississippi River. Now, the Piazza is most famous for the giant murals that once were painted by the natives on the limestone cliffs where supposedly um, the Piazza was slain. And there's been multiple documentation. They don't quite agree with each other, and those murals have been destroyed, but they do like they were indeed historical records. And you can kind of see a sketch of one from early explorer on the lower right. Um, there's a modern mural of it nearby, and that's on top. And you can kind of see where some of the changes have occurred, notably the acquisition of wings. Now, there's been a fair amount of research that has gone into the Piazza and where it came from. They actually asked John Russell at some point, and he said he basically made it completely up. Um, but there does seem to be a lot of relation to the underwater panther. Again, body of water, malevolent, eating flesh. This isn't too far actually from the Great Lakes. Um, and a few years ago, some researchers actually linked it to a legend among the Peoria and the Miami tribes, where this trickster goes and defeats this underwater panther by lulling it to sleep and then blowing it up with gunpowder. So the fact that there's gunpowder, there's also a French explorer, Plague of the Loot. This is relatively modern. It's a relatively modern story in relation to native traditions. So yeah, uh, there's some change there. The next one is the Chiklasila, or the Cumberland Dragon. I haven't found that much information about it, but it seems pretty well recorded once. And that was some soldiers were chasing natives in the Cumberland Mountains and came across this creature that had two legs, bright scales of multiple colors, crown upon its head. Um, and when attacked, it would spew out something that resembled blood before fleeing. And yeah, that's pretty much the extent of it. Some people have linked it to this supposed legend among the Cherokee, who also resided generally in that area, of this snake man, someone who broke taboo by eating squirrel or alternatively turkey in violation of it and being turned into a serpent. Uh, that seems to be extent. Now another one is the snellygasher, which is this bird-like reptile of western Maryland. Um, the interpretations vary a little bit, but they seem to have a metallic beak, razor-sharp teeth, and sometimes they have octopus tentacles that they use to suck people's blood. It seems to originate from the 1730s and from German immigrants, and the name Snelligasher seems to be a corruption of the word Eilergeist, which I think is something like quick ghost. So it seems to have been some sort of Germanic tradition of malevolent spirits that seem to have acquired a dragon form. And that area is kind of known for its hoodoo symbols, notably the seven-pointed stars that seem to appear on um, the sides of barns. And that seems to be supposedly a way to keep Snollygasher at bay. Interestingly, it disappeared after about the 1800s, and then it kind of reappeared again in the 1900s when suddenly there were sightings all across Maryland, including Washington, D.C. And supposedly President Theodore Roosevelt wanted to go hunt it, but nothing came of it. Final example is the Jersey Devil, which is, of course, one of the most famous cryptids in the United States that frequent the Pine Barrens, which is a very sandy, high acidity region that few people live in of southern New Jersey. Generally, this is seen as a bipedal, kangaroo, or wyvern-like creature with a lot of horse or goat characteristics, bat wings, and so on. And it could emit blood-curdling screams and hunt livestock. The general legend of it appears to state that in 1735, a mother Leeds was about to give birth to her 13th child, and kind of being frustrated by the whole children thing, cursed it, saying that, may the devil take this child, or something to that effect. And this monster came out. And so there's been a lot of research that seems to have linked that actually to a lot of local politics in early colonial times. Notably, the Leeds family of that area is actually a historically very wealthy and powerful family. And during the American Revolution, they were kind of royalists, and so they did not gain the favor of their neighbors. One of the Leeds members, a Titan, apparently had an almanac that kind of was in competition with Benjamin Franklin's almanac, Poor Richard's almanac. And there's a bit of a nasty spat where Benjamin Franklin claimed that Titan had actually died, and it was all the letters that he was writing was his ghost taunting him. And so, yeah, I got a bit nasty. But why that's important is that the Leeds family crest was that of free wyverns, pure traditional European wyverns. And at some point, Titan put his family crest as the front logo of his almanac. And it's believed that someone, maybe Benjamin Franklin himself, kind of used those wyverns as a symbol of the Leeds family themselves being devils, basically, and that somehow led to the creation of the Jersey Devil. Now, despite that, there's been sightings for hundreds of years now. Um, like famous people like Stephen Decatur, the admiral, and Joseph Bonaparte, the king of Spain or Italy, um, have claimed to have seen it, and yeah, sightings persist to this day. So I guess the final topic I'd like to bring up is the cryptid monsters with dragon characteristics. And so these, as I've kind of referred to earlier, are cryptid monsters that have become ingrained with modern urban legends and sometimes become part of the cultural fabric of neighboring communities. And I've brought up already the Piazza and its influence on Alton, Illinois, and the Jersey Devil with New Jersey. Uh, so the only other thing I'd like to emphasize the difference between the previous category and this one is that now we're reaching arbitrarily 1900 or so. There have been guns, uh, and there have been science and stuff. So many of these can also be kind of classified as a neocryptid category called neodinosaurs, or dinosaurs that have persisted to the modern day. And so in a lot of these, you kind of see influences of stuff like, for example, pterosaurs, and also other fossil evidence. So some of these cryptids include lake monsters, Pocahontas County fire dragon, and also the Van Meter visitor. Most of these don't really have much of a story associated with them. No, they're just something that looks like a dragon or a dinosaur. The Van Meter visitor actually seems to be some sort of pterosaur with a diamond/laser on its head, and that is apparently bulletproof because settlers shot at it and it didn't do anything. But yeah, by far the most common of these cryptids, dragons that we see today, are lake serpents. And again, most of these come from native legends that have persisted. Some of the actually, this is only a small fraction of it, include the Alkali Lake Monster, Tahoe Tessie, the Bear Lake Monster, the North Shore Monster, Champy, the Ego Pogo, the Ogo Pogo, the Mani Pogo, the Menfear, and the Still all across lakes throughout the United States and Canada. And a lot of the times it's been proven that they're either misidentification of logs or otters or just fish that are actually pretty large, shimmering as it swims, or even just hoaxes. And finally, the category is sea serpents, which is very similar to lake serpents, except for usually they actually are able to dig up remains and sometimes even photograph them. And a lot of these actually seem to be misidentification of, for example, rotting whale remains or sharks, narwhals, oarfish, or seals. And examples of these include the Gloucester sea serpent of Massachusetts and Caborosaurus. And in fact, if you go all the way to the beginning, uh, the Sissi sluti horned serpent of the Pacific Northwest is a sea serpent as well. And that may, again, be related. So yeah, that's kind of a general overview of the entire uh, North America, north of Mesoamerica, anyways, of dragons. No, yeah,
Well, thank you very much for that very well detailed and excellent overview. I mean, for me personally, there were a lot of dragons in there that I never heard about, and that's why I really wanted to have this talk with you specifically, because a lot of people already know about Asian dragons and European dragons, and they are of course very famous and popular. But I don't think many people, especially over here in Europe, know about uh, these American apparitions. So this was fantastic. I just have a couple of questions at the end, and this is
sure.
something I always ask at the end of these talks, and that is, um, we've heard a lot of history and stuff, and well, a few modern day things as well when it came to the cryptids, like sightings and stuff. But how do Americans treat dragons today? Do they view them in a
So,
positive way? Do they surround themselves with dragon imagery usually, or are they completely forgotten and neglected?
so I'd say there's a bit of everything to that. Uh, I've mentioned cryptids, and so you can see some of these legends persist to this day, almost like I don't know if it was another few hundred years, it'd probably be similar to some of those European traditions of, say, Austria or Switzerland, for example, of the local dragon in the valley over there or something like that. Um, the other kind of thing is the Asian population moving in. There are a lot of motifs from China, Korea, Japan, Thailand, Vietnam, uh, and India with the Nagas and so on. Uh, and you frequently see those motifs around restaurants, stores, businesses. Um, they're generally seen as auspicious, so you see them there. But those generally do not seem to mix too much with the original American uh, dragons. They're just kind of transferred dragon, its legends and motifs. I guess the final thing is you kind of just see dragons being seen as symbols of strength and power. I think one of our local soccer teams is named the Dragons. Um, and, there's shows like, Into the Dragon's Den and stuff like that. Uh, so I don't think that there's as much malicious association that like might have used to under, say, Victorian times. Um, so yeah, I guess it's everything you could think of, honestly.
All right, and my last question for you. Well, actually, second to last question. Have you ever seen a dragon-like cryptid, personally?
I mean, I see a lot of whales and dolphins when I'm at the ocean, and they sure look like something that isn't necessarily a giant
But
floating mammalian. Like, I know that they're whales or dolphins because I know what those things are and that they're around here. But, if I see something like that, I certainly probably wouldn't, know if I didn't know.
right, right. But you never seen like a snallygaster come up from the trees and snatch up some unsuspecting hiker.
No, no, no. I don't think I've ever encountered anything strange in all my travels.
Interesting, interesting. And this is my last question. Um, how do you personally feel about dragons, and what is your connection to them?
I mean, I like them. I'm a dragon. Like, I'm I'm ethnically Chinese, so they are the people of the dragon and stuff. Uh,
and that
yeah.
and that's why you specifically like dragons a lot, because of your Chinese connection to dragons.
I mean, I just enjoy them. I enjoy that there seems to be a lot associated with them. If you go into, for example, the Chinese zodiac, it's the only one that doesn't seem related to an actual physical animal, for example. Uh, so there seems to be a lot of deep culture and ideas that are associated with this chimera. And yeah, it's fascinating. I mentioned before the association of the seven sins of Catholicism, the European, and so on and so forth.
Right. Excellent. Well, thanks again for sharing all of this with us. And yeah, this has been Dragon Calls episode 3 with Clostridium and uh, I, Zar Antonov of the Society of Dracology. Thank you all for watching and goodbye. Cheers.